You're listening to the Sustainable Angler Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Crawford. Did you know that according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that in order to avoid the most catastrophic effects of climate change, that we need to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions 49% this decade and be carbon neutral by 2050? Well, you may be wondering, how do we do that? And one solution is solar. So I'm especially excited to share this interview with you with Creative Energy's co-owner, Scott Kane. The reason I'm excited is because I was actually an intern for Creative Energies back in 2010, where I was fortunate to get to travel all over Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, installing solar panels. So we catch up on that. We also talk about, what is solar for those of you who may be interested in learning more. How does it work? But also the challenges that the industry faces, including what's happening right now in South Carolina, but also Utah and Wyoming, where energy utilities are trying to reduce the amount that they buy solar back from homes and businesses, which drastically extends the payback period, making it far less attractive. And then we share some of Creative Energy's success stories, such as them being a benefit corporation, but also working to solve the climate crisis by installing solar. So hope you enjoy. This episode of The Sustainable Angler is brought to you by Emerger Strategies, a sustainable business consultancy whose mission is to solve the climate crisis by helping your business go carbon neutral and zero waste. To learn more, visit emergerstrategies.com. Before Scott kind of dives in and tells us a little bit more about himself, I'll preface this by saying I was an intern for Creative Energies back in, we were talking earlier, I think 2009 or 2010. I'll have to go back and look at that, but was an installer and had a blast installing solar panels all over the Wyoming and Utah and Idaho, and it was just a really cool experience and pretty amazing to, like, I went back to Jackson a couple years ago, and to see some of the projects that are there, it is really neat to go back and be like, oh, cool. It makes you feel like you were part of the solution. So thanks for that, Scott. But anyway, I digress. So Scott, I wanted to kind of kick things off and just let you give an intro of yourself and Creative Energies, and we'll kind of dive in.
That's great, Rick. Thanks. This is really cool, and it's fun to have our paths. So, you spent some time working with us back in about 2009 or so, and you've stayed in the sustainability game, but on a very different path, and that's really fun to see.
Yeah.
Since then, our business, Creative Energies, has continued on a similar path to what we were doing 10 years ago, but maybe with more focus and more urgency in our work. So we are a regional solar power system provider, and we work in the states of Wyoming, Idaho, and Utah, and have been doing that for 20 years now. And it's changed over those 20 years. The first 10 years that we were in this business, we were trying to fill kind of any need that seemed to arise as it related to small scale renewable energy systems. We were putting in wind towers. We were designing and installing ground source heat pump systems. We were doing solar hot water heating systems. Really, anywhere that there was a need for small scale renewable energy systems, we were doing it. And really, right around the time that you were working with us, and in the couple of years after, it really became clear that photovoltaics, solar electric systems, was the technology that had won the race. It was the one that was most effective for reasonable cost, for long-term operation, for low cost of maintenance. Photovoltaics is what we decided to focus on right around back when you were working with us. And since then, we have been exclusively focused just on building grid tie, and to a small extent off-grid solar power systems.
That's awesome. I think when I was with y'all, I'll just have to mention this. A couple of cool projects that come to mind was one of them was Mesa Verde, and I wasn't there for the actual
Mesa Verde National Park. Was our customer, and that was really cool. It was federal government spending money to try to reduce their, really twofold, trying to reduce their climate change impact, but maybe more importantly, federal government trying to take a leadership role and demonstrate that the technology works. And I think that was money well spent back in, again, like 2009 that we did that work. I think that's a great role for the federal government to try to be the first in line, show that this stuff works, and then let the private sector and individuals gain confidence and start investing in that technology themselves.
Yeah, totally agree. And that's so that was a memorable project because it was so cool because, the Mesa Verde, I think they were maybe, if I remember this correctly, I was trying to think of some of the stuff before the interview, and I was like going through some old photos, and I was like, oh yeah, because they were the first, or maybe not the first, but they took advantage of passive solar design by the way that they had located their dwellings. And it was really neat to be there a couple centuries later and be installing a new technology and solar to produce their energy. So I just always thought that was really cool to be part of that project. It was neat.
Yes, I love that, and thanks for reminding me. I think there was a poster or something around saying 1,000 years of solar technology at Mesa Verde, because all those dwellings were built in the exact same way that we should be building ours right now, with climate responsiveness in mind. Yeah, oriented to the south, sheltered by overhangs from the high summer sun. We got a lot to learn.
Yeah. So speaking of a little bit to learn, to some people, solar may seem daunting, or they're maybe don't quite understand it. And I was wondering if you, at a very just basic level, could explain kind of just how solar works and how the technology helps to provide renewable energy.
I think a lot of people these days are familiar with how modern solar power systems work, but it's good to make sure we all do, because hopefully it's becoming increasingly ubiquitous in our country and around the world. And just as we all know how our home hot water heater works, or we all know basically how our plumbing system works, we all should know how solar works, because hopefully it is something that is going to be literally everywhere in the decade ahead, because it needs to from the standpoint of if we're really going to succeed in our work to combat climate change, our work on renewable energy development, it's got to really accelerate. It's got to be everywhere. So good chance to talk about how solar works. The main building block, of course, for solar power systems are the solar panels. I think everyone's pretty familiar with that. We focus on primarily on rooftop solar. or what is often referred to as being distributed generation. And this is the solar power systems that are located at the point of energy use. Keep in mind that in modern day solar, actually most solar in the US is not being deployed that way. Most solar is being deployed right now in large utility scale solar plants, which is great also. So really, solar these days is really coming in two different flavors. And again, this is all solar electric systems. These are all, generating electricity directly through the photovoltaic effect using, solar panels. But you can really think of it in two different halves. One half is what are essentially solar power plants. They're big these days. They're increasingly enormous and produce an incredible amount of energy. And these utility scale solar plants are being built all over the country. In the early days, it was really just in the desert Southwest that these were being built. But with the cost of solar coming down, they're being built in Vermont, they're being built in Washington State. It doesn't matter. The economics are still okay, even in less sunny places. So that's happening all over the country. And that actually is where well over half of all solar is being installed these days. The other part of it, the part of it that we're involved in, is this distributed scale solar. And that's, we often refer to it or think of it as rooftop solar. But this takes a couple different forms as well. This is going on residential rooftops. It's going on, your local coffee shop. It's going on your supermarket roof. A couple of the biggest investors in rooftop solar these days are brands like Target and Walmart that are increasingly putting solar power systems on the roofs of their large commercial facilities, because it's perfect. We have all this available roof space, particularly on big flat roof buildings, and it's a perfect place to have solar generation. The way that this distributed scale solar works is that it's filling the function of reducing energy use at the point of use. Okay. The term of art here is we talk about this kind of solar as being behind the meter. So this is energy generation that's happening at the same location, on the same utility customer service, where the energy is being used, so that the net result is simply that utility customer, whether that's a home or a apartment building or a warehouse, that utility customer is simply winding up buying less energy from the utility company. So that's where the economic incentive comes in, by offsetting some portion of a user's energy consumption. They're just having to buy less from the utility. So that's where the homeowner or the business owner gets your economic benefit, instead of buying 1,000 kilowatt hours for your home. Maybe in the end you're only buying 400 kilowatt hours per month because your solar power system on your roof is producing 600 kilowatt hours per month. That's the simple math on how net metered solar power system works and gives a financial benefit. Clearly, aside from the financial benefit, you can imagine the environmental benefit there as well. That for every kilowatt hour of electricity that you don't need to buy from the utility, that also implies that the utility didn't need to generate that kilowatt hour of electricity. So that implies either less fossil fuel, natural gas or coal being burned in order to generate that, or perhaps less demand on another resource like a hydro project or a wind farm. It just means less energy being used from that resource, which eventually is going to wind up meaning less conventional fuels need to get burned somewhere in order to meet that need. So that's really where you get both an economic benefit to the user and environmental benefit overall in the system.
Yeah, and so one of the things you kind of, so thanks for that. And one of the things that you touched on just to kind of put this in, I think in context for everyone listening is like, so why, because we know that renewable energy is a climate change solution. So why is that important? So according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, right? The IPCC, what they say is that in order to avoid the most catastrophic effects of climate change, that we will need to reduce our global emissions by 55% this decade in the 2020s by 2030. So how do we do that, right? How do you reduce your global emissions? How do we reduce that? Well, it starts with, I think, individuals and businesses deciding that, hey, well, we'd like to reduce our emissions. And I think that, solar is a great way to do that. From what I understand, when you include tax incentives and things like that at the federal and state level, there's a very solid business case for going solar and using renewable energy to not only reduce your operational costs, but to also help solve climate change.
Yes, I think it's a totally appropriate tool toward that end. As you mentioned, the IPCC recommendations, they're really aggressive. For us to meet the carbon emission reduction requirements, we've got to be acting on multiple fronts all at the same time. And over the last decade, especially, renewable energy advancement, improvement in technology, reduction in cost has really made the transition in the utility sector a possibility. Like we have everything we need right now to drive down emissions in the electric generation sector, and you may remember from the IPCC recommendations, the utility sector is the single biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. But there's a couple other sectors that are right behind: transportation, buildings. So we need to be focusing on all of that. And the energy generation sector is the one that I think more than any, like we've got the answer for it right now. We don't need to invent anything new. We've got all the tools. And of the tools available, solar as well, solar in those two different camps I just mentioned, distributed scale solar and utility scale solar, great. We've got utility scale wind, great. Offshore wind, great. We're adding in battery storage as being another needed element to help the utility grid digest all of this intermittent renewable generation. Like we've got all the tools that we need, and now it's just a matter of like we just got to go. The starting gun has gone off. We've got everything we need. Now we're just trying to win this race. We're trying to deploy rapidly enough to get the job done. And hopefully other good people, including people that you're talking to in this podcast, are working on those other sectors as well, whether it's transportation, building technology, agriculture. Like we got to be doing all that stuff as well. But we're focusing here on how solar can be one of the key tools that we're applying on reducing the carbon intensity of our of our electric generation sector.
Yeah. And that's really important. I think too, a couple of things that you mentioned is, looking at transportation, like you see it everywhere. And based on what I read and, we're about to reinvent transportation, and everything will be electric. There will be the electrification of the transportation industry. We've got a ways to go on that front, but I think that that's the future. And if you have transportation powered by renewable energy, that takes care of those two. And then if you have buildings that are energy efficient and have renewable energy powering them, that helps to take care of that. And it's, to your point, I think, is that, look, this is absolutely achievable and doable we don't need to wait on, you hear a lot about this, or at least I do, in sustainability nerd world of reading all sorts of stuff. People talk about, wait till this carbon storage technology comes out to save the day. And we may need that at some point later, but we have today, right now, the technology to deploy. And as you said, this is a race against climate. Like we're running out of time, and now is the time to take action. And solar is one of the solutions, which is super cool.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, for keeping in mind, like the focus of your podcast, like I want us to make it really clear that fish love solar. Right. Like there is no doubt about it. Like you people know fish better than I do. But I'll tell you this, like the future of fish anywhere in the world is much brighter if we get serious about solar.
Yeah.
So, I mean, okay, back to like some basic climate science stuff here, but as I know, Rick, and I think probably a lot of people do, increasing concentration of carbon in the atmosphere results in acidification of oceans. Like that's like we got that pinned down. We understand the connection between those two. And really, if we think about the increasing concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere over the last 100 years plus that we've been accumulating it there, a lot of that has been absorbed back out of the atmosphere and into the world's oceans, and that has substantially buffered the rate at which it's concentrating in the atmosphere. But that's come at terrible cost. If you and your friends like coral reefs, then things are moving entirely in the wrong direction for you.
Yep.
Because increasing acidification of oceans is bleaching coral reefs and reducing the biodiversity. Bleaching basically translates to killing. It's reducing the biodiversity in what was some of the richest environment on the planet.
Yep.
And further, if those of your people that find joy in chasing trout in mountain streams, again, things are moving entirely in the wrong direction for trout. Trout like ample, free-flowing, cold streams, and climate change is moving things in the wrong direction, particularly here in the Rocky Mountains, where snowpack used to last. Mountain snowpack used to last all the way through the summer and kept streams flowing fully, even through August and into September. Snowpack melts off much faster than it ever used to. The glaciers are smaller.
Yeah.
Streams alter forest fires, and suddenly you're removing a lot of the shading on the streams. So we've got water that's warming up. Streams that used to be perennial are now intermittent. So if those are the forces, the things that are happening in the world around us, we've got a very limited number of tools that are really effective at trying to rapidly reduce the amount of carbon that we're putting into the atmosphere. And I think solar is really one of the big, not the only one by any means, but it is one of the really effective tools that's available to us right now.
Yeah. And just a couple of examples that I'd like to just point out for what you're talking about. First off, I'm pretty sure we're going to now make a sticker that says trout love solar or fish love solar. Maybe we can do a Creative Energies Sustainable Angler collab on that. I think that's got to be a bumper sticker. But some of the things that, we talk about climate change and the effects, and kind of one of the things that a couple of things came to mind when you were talking was, to me anyway, was one, the interconnectedness of it all, right? It's not just like it's happening in this one little corner of the world. It's happening everywhere and in different ways. And in some inconsistent ways, but what we are seeing is that, our oceans are warming. That's changing migratory patterns of fish. People are catching snook in Charleston now. To give you an example, which normally a snook wouldn't survive the winter here. And they were catching, someone caught a record snook right here in Charleston Harbor within the last month. So that's just one example. Another example, we see sea level rise, significant sea level rise in Charleston. It is every year is another record breaking year of the number of days that Charleston floods. And the way that they measure that is from the buoy out in the harbor. When it reaches a certain height, I think it's 8 feet, then there will be areas of downtown Charleston that are going to flood, even if it's not raining. Like, this is sunny day flooding, way abnormal amount of water being pushed in. And, they don't call us the low country for anything. We'll be the ones who are affected by sea level rise first, as the sea levels continue to rise. So I'll add this. Another example out west that you see is stream closures because water temperatures are higher. I think in Montana, they call it like hoot owl regulation, where you at like 2 p.m. you have to stop trout fishing because the water is too hot. They will not survive the fight, and that's becoming more and more common. So I think just it's important to understand that, one, I think the urgency of climate action, but two, this is not something that it's like some far off, in 100 years, this is going to happen. It's like, it's happening today, it's happening right now. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, that's great. And again, I think the argument there is like, it's pressing right now. And if people are looking for solutions, how they can be part of changing the trajectory of history. Not to say that solar is the only answer, but solar is an answer that's available right now, and that most people, whether through their own home, through a business they might run, through communities that they're involved in, have an opportunity to advocate, either investing personally or writing to their legislators or getting involved in their own community, to encourage the rapid transition from toward renewables.
So you just said something that it's happening in South Carolina. I'm curious about what are some of the obstacles that the solar industry faces as it relates to this transition? Because I know that they're out there. I know that they're here in South Carolina. There's basically and I found this out recently, but basically Dominion Energy is our utility, and they're basically the net metering, meaning that if your solar system is putting more back into the grid than you're using, I think that's right. I might be wrong on that, Scott, but
that's right, and that's a dynamic that's going on in lots of parts of the country. This applies to the distributed generation, the smaller scale behind the meter generation that are generally operating under this structure called net metering, and historically net metering has been set up where the customer generator gets full retail credit for all of the energy that they're producing. Keep in mind that energy kind of has two different pathways. There's energy that you produce that, let's say it's middle of the day in South Carolina right now, you've got solar on your roof and your air conditioning is running. A lot of that energy that you're producing right now is being used right now to reduce your consumption right now. In that way, solar is identical to any other energy efficiency measure, or simply identical to you turning off the air conditioning and letting the house be a little hotter. It's identical. And to that extent, so that part of your energy generation clearly you should be getting full value for it in the same way that you get full value when you switch off the lights and stop using the electricity.
Yeah.
There's a portion of that energy generation that sometimes is exported back onto the grid. If you're producing more than you're using at any one moment in time, that excess generation by some utilities is given a lower value than retail. And it sounds like that's what Dominion is doing right now.
Yeah.
And I think there's been a little bit of a push behind the scenes among utilities to try to reclaim some value on that portion of the excess generation. That excess generation, if you from your own home rooftop solar, if you're producing some excess, what happens to it? You're putting it back onto the grid. You've got neighbors or you've got a business next door. Your excess generation is essentially going to just be used by those entities, and those entities are going to get billed by the utility for the energy they use. So the utility is getting the value of having energy get produced out at the far tips of its distribution system, out at the tendrils of the grid. So the utility didn't have to generate that energy. It didn't have to transmit it over power lines. It didn't have to go through a substation and not through a distribution system. It was already right there and able to serve the nearby utility customers. But somehow the narrative is that net metering customers are freeloading off of this system. And I think it's really a false narrative, but it's gotten pushed. And I think ultimately, if you dig far enough, really where the concern probably is that net metered customers are kind of breaking a monopoly grip on this very simplistic relationship that's existed for 100 years now, where there is one power company. Exactly. And each customer is able only to buy their energy from that one monopoly provider. And that's been fine for the most part. It's been a great productive system that has served us all really well. But we're shaking it up a little bit, where that monopoly utility provider now to some extent has a little bit of a competitor in the form of rooftop solar producers. And I think the utility industry is really uncomfortable with that and is looking for ways to push back against it. And I wish they were able to take a longer view and recognize that in the long haul, we're transitioning the entire generation system. And this is one part of it. It's just that the customers are driving the transition rather than the utilities driving the transition. And I wish they were able to take a step back, recognize, hey, we're all in this together. We utilities, hey, we're going to build utility scale solar plants and wind farms. We're going to do that. Exactly. You customers, you guys go ahead and work on the distributed scale. We're all in this together. But it's not coming across that way.
So it's funny you say that, because I've thought about this often. It's like, why are they not transitioning to just being energy service providers? And that, like, clearly the demand, their customers want solar, their customers want renewable energy. I would gladly take, whatever it is, my average monthly payment, and say, okay, that's fine. I don't care if you got it for free. If you're going to be maintaining the power lines or whatever, if you're my energy service provider, I will pay you my average monthly utility if I know it's coming from renewable energy, and it's no problem. That sounds like a wonderful model. Like,
yeah, I think the problem is that the technology is advancing more rapidly than the regulatory structures. We're still using sort of the same structure that we've had in place for utilities in terms of like the rate structures and the way utilities are promised certain returns from their regulating agencies. That stuff hasn't really changed. Mm-hmm. And some of this really has to happen at like the federal government and state government levels, and that's where, like, to some extent, it comes down to like voting in politics. If we can get regulators in there that are nimble and willing to look at a rapidly changing utility environment, we could get to that point where utilities could be accepting and fill a role just like you're just describing, where the utility's job is just to make sure people are getting safe, reliable, and environmentally responsible energy. And that last piece is not written into the rules or the mandate that our monopoly utilities are operating under. So yeah, a lot of it actually just comes back to sort of a national and state level politics.
It seems like as it relates to anything with climate, it always comes back to policy and politics and changing the way that we do things in order to set the stage for the success of, for example, utilities running on 100% renewable. But okay, so I am going to shift gears here for just a second, because we have talked about some of these challenges, and I will say, like, today I was like reading more into the Dominion Energy thing, and like I was pretty heated. So I've had enough of that energy for today, pun intended, and let's shift into sharing some success stories. Like, for example, a couple of things that I'll mention, and you can elaborate however you'd like. But for one, I saw on your website that y'all are a B Corp. So to me, that's super positive. Benefit corporations are, measuring beyond just economic bottom line, but really their social, governance, and environmental bottom lines of performance. But also that since y'all's inception, you've installed 14 megawatts of solar power, or maybe it's renewables combined. But either way, those are making a real positive impact. And I just thought maybe we could highlight some of that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because we do think about that a lot. It would be easy for a solar company to say, like, hey, the thing that we're doing in the world is valuable and virtuous. So let's call it good and just do that. But I think that's missing the point to some extent. I think that the way in which you're doing that work is also really important. And for our company, and I'll point out, really, I think for a lot of regional solar providers, the way in which we do our work is as important as the work that we're doing. So yeah, you mentioned one thing. We're a B Corp, and just a quick overview of what that is, because I think the term is not that widely known. So the B refers to benefit, and it's essentially a certification structure through which a company can get evaluated in really all aspects of the way it's conducting its business, through an independent nonprofit certifying body. B Labs is the name of the nonprofit. There's about 3,000 B Corps operating in the U.S. right now. It's all kinds of businesses, and the structure is that there's a long list of questions, something like 240 topics on which a company gets asked to provide information about the way they do their work, documentation, and it relates to employment practices, procurement, company governance. All these things get boiled down, and a company of any kind can earn points through the certification process by hopefully by doing the right thing in enough of those categories that they achieve a certifying score. So it's not restricted to just one kind of business. Really a business of any kind could choose to pursue this. And often when a business decides to try to be certified as a B Corp, they'll miss the first time around, but it gives them a structure to look at the way that they're operating their business and make improvements.
Yeah.
So we've gone through the certification process a couple times. The first time through, we barely passed, and it's like, okay, so that structure now gives us some things that we can work on. We just recertified just in the past year, and we got a much better score this time around. And yet, there's still a lot of questions that we didn't earn any points on. So that gives us more topics that we can keep trying to improve on.
Yep.
So yeah, the fact that we're a solar company, yeah, great. We're through our work, through our mission, we're working on trying to address climate change, but we might not be pushing the world forward if we were doing that while employing lousy business practices or treating employees unfairly or disposing of our waste in irresponsible ways.
Yep.
So that's been a big push for us. And another one, and again, I think this is not uncommon for solar companies, is that we have I think a pretty strong and healthy focus on community and how we're supporting the communities in which we operate. There are solar businesses that are operating at a national scale as well, and you're probably familiar with a couple of the names. Sunrun, something that used to be called Solar City, and that's great. They're working at a larger scale, and that's great. And I wish them well. But I do think that this business, and probably many other ones, might be best served by companies that are working on sort of the smaller or more regional basis, where they can really gain expertise in the sort of the specifics of the challenges that face them in that particular the physical environment in which they work. Hey, we work in the Rocky Mountains and work in a lot of high elevation, super snowy locations, and we have expertise specifically on that, or dealing with high winds, or dealing with large ungulates, deer and elk, grazing in and around where we're building, solar ground mounts. Like we gain expertise that's specific to our particular region, and I do think that solar as a field is actually best served by small, sort of hyper-focused local companies that are connected with the community, that know the local permitting and regulation requirements in their area. But in particular, I think it's that community involvement. That's the piece that really I think is essential. And in years ahead, hopefully, any town or city that you pass through, in the same way they've always had, like local plumbing or electrical or heating and cooling contractors, hopefully any community you go through anywhere in the country is going to have its local solar contractor. Yep.
Yeah, I think that is, I definitely think it's the future. My hope is that we, I just love the race analogy. So if we're in a race from now to 2030 to have our emissions, then let's start seeing solar on every rooftop and meet these reduction targets and save some of the fish that we all love to chase with a fly rod or a fishing rod in hand. So I think that's probably a pretty positive message to leave with, other than I know that there's some members of the Fly Fishing Climate Alliance. They're committed to going carbon neutral by 2030. Part of the main thing that we're pushing is to actually reduce their footprint. Solar is one great way to do it. So Climate Alliance members in Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, or y'all in Colorado? I'm not sure.
We stick with those. Yeah, we stick those three states of Utah, Wyoming, and Idaho.
Okay.
And we're easy to find if anyone were to go on the web to CE as in creative energies, cesolar.com. They'd find us. And extended further and mentioned that we're part of a cooperative of regional solar companies that operate in almost all 50 states. And most of these other companies are like us, small, specialized, regional solar providers. And the name of that cooperative is Amicus Solar. So if you're in some other part of the state, part of the country, if you're in Oregon and you're looking to find a solar contractor who is going to be, high quality and focused on your region, if you were to go to amicussolar.com, that's amicussolar.com, you'd be able to find a small regional solar provider in that area, and most of the members of that network are also B Corps, like we are.
That's super cool. That's awesome. Well, Scott, I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us joining me on the Sustainable Angler. It was awesome catching up with you, and I have also had some fun looking back through some old photos and remembering installing solar all over the West, which were definitely fond memories for me.
Rick, I think we've got your old tool belt still hanging here in the shop. So anytime that you want to get back out here, we've got a spot in the truck for it.
Well, may take you up on that sometime, but thanks for listening to the Sustainable Angler, and special thanks to Scott Kane from Creative Energies. Also, be on the lookout on the Emerger Strategies website. We will have some Trout Love Solar and Redfish Love Solar stickers available soon, so stay tuned there. And if you like what you're hearing on the show, please leave a rating and review on iTunes. And really appreciate it, and hope you have a great one. Thanks.